almost there. Okay, guys, writing a conclusion. This is what you're going to be talking about in lesson 9. Okay, your conclusion wraps up your story. This is the most important part of your story because this is where your reader figures out what your theme of your whole entire short story was. Okay, so did your story begin with a problem? And if so, did it get solved, right? What happened? If your narrator presented more of a situation or an observation, did the main character grow or change in any way? Did the events and experiences lead to some new knowledge or realization? All of this stuff gets wrapped up in your conclusion. So remember we talked about that your story on the, beginning, middle, and end. When you look in the Google slideshow that has the directions, you're going to see a chart that says beginning, middle, and end, and it has your plot diagram on there, okay? And in the chart, it looks like it's equal, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end are all equal parts, but that's not true. Your beginning and your end are short, and most of the bulk of everything happens in the middle, where you're building up that suspense all the way to the climax. And then once we hit the climax, all these events that happen at the end that lead to the resolution. And that is where your conclusion is, that those events and your resolution at the end, okay? So at the end of your short story, make sure you're not introducing any new information. You can do a plot twist, but you have to be very careful about that. But don't introduce a new problem or a new character or anything at the end of your story. Remember, this is a short story. It needs to end here. There's no sequels to this. So you have to close it up, or at least let your audience infer the closing to your story. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to watch a short video on 6 different types of story endings, and then we will talk about it a little more in detail afterwards.
Are you the type of writer who thinks about their story's beginning before figuring out the ending? Whether or not that's the case, knowing the different types of endings you could utilize in your story can be super helpful. Stick around to learn more. Hey guys, Noor here, and welcome back to my channel. For those visiting for the first time, hello! I'm the fantasy author of the novel Divinity Falling. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe for weekly writing advice videos. The ending of a story is just as important as the beginning. After all, a terrible ending ruins a good book just as much as a terrible beginning ruins readers' expectations. So it's not enough to write a good book but get lazy with the ending. That's why today we're talking about the 6 different types of story endings you could write. First up, the explicit ending. This is probably the most common type of ending writers use, myself included. This ending is great because it wraps up every loose end. Any questions the reader has throughout the story or any plot holes are answered at the end of the story. We get to know exactly how everything ties together and why things have occurred. This is personally my favorite type of ending because I hate not knowing something at the end of the book. In fact, when a standalone book ends up not answering my questions at the end, I end up so angry. Next up, the implicit ending. This is the complete opposite of the explicit ending. In this ending, everything is vague, and anyone can interpret the story as they wish. I personally enjoy this type of ending in short stories since I don't mind not having all my questions answered by the end. I'm not as invested in the characters as I would be in a long novel, so the ambiguous ending isn't frustrating. Another ending is the twist ending. This is when the unexpected happens at the end. The reader thinks the story is going in one direction, but then you pull the rug right from under their feet and reveal an entirely different direction that they weren't anticipating. If you choose to do this type of ending, make sure you do so carefully, as surprising the reader can sometimes feel like you cheated. Then you have the tie-back ending. This is when the ending of the book ties everything back to the beginning. So all the hints the writer left throughout the book must come together at the end and form a clear picture. I enjoy this ending a lot in mystery and thriller books since the ending explains the beginning. The 5th type of ending is the long view ending. This is where you tell your reader a bit about your character's future. Will your characters find success? Will they get married and have kids? Will they have a happy ever after? This is the most common in romance books since readers want to see what happens to the characters. And lastly, the cliffhanger ending. This is usually done if the book is part of a series that entices readers to read on in order to learn about what happened next. Major plot points are wrapped up at the end of the book, but there are still certain aspects that are left hanging. Almost all of us are familiar with cliffhanger endings, especially in series. I love reading series, so I'm a big fan of this type of ending. However, I don't recommend doing a cliffhanger ending if you're writing a standalone book. Doing so just angers readers. This isn't exactly like the implicit ending, where you have everything vague and up to the reader's interpretation. This is laying plot holes in front of the reader and ending the story without leaving any hints as to how things could go on. So unless you're writing a series, I don't recommend this. So that's all I have for you today. I'd love to know, which types of endings are your favorites? Do you feel comfortable writing one type of ending but love reading a whole different kind? Let me know in the comments. If you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. I put out weekly writing advice videos that will take your story to the next level. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media to see what I'm up to from day to day and to chat with me. Also, before we go, I just want to give a quick shout out to Sarah Frayne and Lori B from my shoutouts here over on Patreon, as well as all my amazing patrons. You are all so awesome. Thank you so much for your support. And remember, North for President!
Alright, so from the video, she gave 6 different ways of ending, and those we're talking about mostly books, but you can use those in short stories as well. A cliffhanger usually is not used for a short story though, okay, because you're not going to have a sequel to this, okay? So let's talk about a little bit more about the best ways to end a short story specifically. So you can have a resolved or explicit ending. Remember, explicit means it's directly stated in the text. I can pretty much just copy and paste it right over somewhere if I wanted to. It packages the whole story in one reading and everything is concluded for the reader. They don't have to guess at anything. Okay, then there's the implied or implicit ending that leaves the reader some clues to piece together the ending on their own. So they kind of have to infer that ending, what happened. They can kind of come to a conclusion about what they think happened right at the end of the story. A lot of short stories either are explicit or implicit endings. Okay, those are probably the 2 most common ones. There's a twist ending that's an exciting surprise at the end of the story, or a set of unexpected events that catch the reader off guard. You're kind of like, oh my goodness, I did not expect that to happen. Okay, and that would be kind of like maybe we talked about in one of the lessons about how maybe the person that we liked throughout the character that we liked throughout the story, we find out in the end is actually the bad guy in the story. That would be kind of like a twist ending. Okay, there's a bare ending or tie back ending, and that reveals the ending at the beginning of the story, and then the reader's robbed of the suspense that comes with an unknown ending if you use those. But you'd have to add a lot of twists and turns as the story goes through, and you go through the middle part of it. So I probably wouldn't recommend number 4 for our short story right now. That's probably something that's a little bit more advanced, unless you've been writing a whole bunch of stories and you feel like you want to tackle that. And then, like I said, the cliffhanger is used more for books or series, because you basically leave the story unresolved. It leaves like some kind of suspense there. It compels the reader to want to read the next book or watch the next movie, right? But this is a short story, so there is no next book, there is no next movie, so you kind of don't want to just leave them hanging. You know, it's kind of like for television series, you can leave cliffhangers, and then that encourages your audience to come back and watch the next episode, right? Because you left them hanging and they want to know what's going to happen next. So in short stories, it's kind of like you don't want to do that because you're not going to have anything following it up. You kind of want to have them either explicitly know what happened, or that you gave enough clues that they can piece that together themselves. Okay, so I'm going to recommend not using a cliffhanger for the end of your short story. Okay, But those are the endings. So basically go through, kind of decide what kind of ending do I want to have for my story, and then make sure that you have all the pieces that fit together to get there. Okay, guys. All right. Remember, you are writing your own short story for this unit. You should be about done by now. And if you've been writing as you go, you should be done right now. And the next few lessons, we're going to talk about going back and revising and editing your essay, or your, not essay, but your short story. All right, guys, happy writing!